Hello, beautiful people. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a fabulous week. I'm Dr. Trina Hinkley from the Expanded Self and popping back on today to chat to you a little bit more about grit. So in case you didn't catch Monday's video or you're watching this on YouTube later, we got to the point of saying that grit may or may not be a thing in its own right, but think about it in the context of it's around perseverance, it's around consistent effort, it's around keeping on, it's around self-discipline. It's that kind of an idea, regardless of what the researchers may decide to call it and whether it's different from something else that already exists. So what I wanted to cover today was some of the benefits that you might see in your life if you're able to maintain that sense of grit or that sense of perseverance, that sense of keeping on and continuing to aim for an outcome or a goal that's of value or of interest to you. So most of the research or some of the research in this space is around the benefits for kids. So I'll run through those briefly, and there's quite a long list of potential benefits for we grown-ups as well. So for kids, what we see, for kids who have more grit, more perseverance, more self-discipline, whatever label you want to put on it, we see more academic success and academic motivation. So kids are more likely to want to succeed. Higher levels of physical activity. So think about that idea of perseverance, and you're going to push yourself a little bit harder to do a little bit more. Greater school motivation, academic engagement and school satisfaction. So not only will they push themselves to succeed, but they also feel happier with their efforts at school as well. And better social emotional learning, and this is around things like positive emotion, relationship skills, responsible decision making, self-management and social awareness. So kids who have more perseverance are more likely to show up, more likely to be able to engage with other people in an appropriate way and exhibit a lot of those pro-social behaviours that we know are really valuable in making connections and supporting us. So that's for the kids. For the grown-ups, because I suspect most of us listening today are grown-ups, if you have more grit, then you're more likely to have greater life satisfaction. So this probably stems from the idea that you're going to persevere and you're going to get the outcomes that you want, and therefore you're going to be more satisfied. So if you think about it from the perspective of, if you have an outcome in mind, say you want to buy a particular house that's worth a certain amount of money, and you start working towards it and then you become disillusioned and you give up, you're not going to achieve that outcome. But if you have grit and you persevere and you keep your eye focused on that outcome, then you're more likely to get it, which means that you're probably going to be more happier with your life. More meaning in life, probably the same idea as life satisfaction. Higher levels of psychological well-being, similar sort of idea again. Lower levels of suicidal ideation. So this means you're less likely to think about committing suicide. Lower levels of work-related burnout. Again, keeping your eye on the long-term outcome. And lower levels of depression. So having more grit can help us keep on keeping on so that we focus on the outcomes, and perhaps we avoid working ourselves to the bone. Perhaps we are able to engage in more self-care activities to make sure that we get the outcomes that we want. More grit in adults leads to high levels of happiness and self-esteem. So again, think about it from the perspective of if you're looking for looking at achieving a long-term goal, focusing on that and working towards it, and you get it, your self-esteem is likely to go up because you believe in your ability to do it. You feel good about yourself for doing it. Now this one's interesting, organisational citizenship behaviour. Not a term I'd ever heard before, but turns out that it's a pretty fancy schmancy term for engaging in pro-social behaviours at work and going the extra mile. Thank you very much. So this is the idea of giving more, being more supportive of your colleagues, helping your colleagues, those kinds of ideas. So higher levels of grit, higher levels of organisational citizenship behaviour. And I wonder how many of us are going to be able to see examples of that in our lives now that we know that it's actually a thing. Higher levels of grit also associated with more positive leadership style if you're in a leadership position in your organisation or in your community. And this is particularly true where you focus on creating abundance and well-being. So having more grit can help us lead our teams, lead our community members to have better well-being as well. Also leads us towards more favourable, higher levels of goals and more favourable and better communication. So we're able to persevere in that idea of trying to get our idea across, trying to connect with somebody through our communication. Now, this one I also found really interesting. People with more grit were found to have a deeper experience of effortless concentration, or what some of us might call flow. So these people, it seems, are able to really focus on a task and put their effort towards it and then avoid interruptions. So they're not going constantly to their phone to check their emails. They're not trying to listen to the next song or pay attention to the conversation that's happening in the cubicle next to them, or indeed out on the footpath at the front of their house. So being able to focus, being able to persevere, being able to apply your grittiness can help engage in flow, which is where things also flow creatively and more favourably. So some of these are probably linked a little bit. Having more grit can help protect us, act as a buffer against the effects of unethical supervisor behaviour. So the mechanism for that one seems to be around the fact that when we feel more gritty, when we have more perseverance, and our supervisors are behaving in an unethical way, we can make sense of that dissonance that's happening between us and between them, and we can apply ourselves to achieve an outcome even if we don't have that support from our supervisors. Better resilience, particularly if you're an older adult, so better ability to be able to keep on keeping on. Slightly higher income and job satisfaction. Now, these ones were statistically significant for anybody out there who's nerdy like me, but the effect was quite small. So I think it was something like about a 6% higher income if you have more grit compared to less grit, and maybe a 3% increase in job satisfaction. So they were quite small numbers, but they were significant and probably meaningful when we think about 6%. You know, I'm not going to try and do the math. Well, if you're on a $60,000 salary, 6% is 10% of your income. So that's not to be snuffled at. And the final one is that if you're a general practitioner and you have more grit, you're more likely to stay in your job, so there's better retention rates for GPs who have higher grit. You're more likely to be engaged in what you're doing, so there's a bit of a common theme coming through here around engagement, and you're more likely to promote a safe culture. So if we think about what's going on here, this idea of having more grit, having more perseverance, being consistently focused on the same outcomes allows us to achieve better, be more focused, be more in flow, be more satisfied with what's going on. I don't think anybody really needs to look at the literature to know that those things are beneficial and to make sense of the, they're kind of logical, those extensions. So I hope that's given you something of value today, and I'd love to hear from you and if you're happy listening to the videos, if they're giving you some value or interest in your lives. So have a great day, what's left of it, and I'll be back on Friday with a little meditation to help us develop more grit in our lives. Bye. Thanks for listening.